Hey, welcome to the channel. This is David Kavanaugh, and I thought it was time to give an update on what's going on with the FZR1000. I rode it a little bit after I got the carbs back, but I've found some problems. One was that I was leaking fuel, and that's never a good thing. So what I discovered was that here, if I can put this down, the sender unit here was wet on the bottom and was leaking fuel, so I got a replacement and that'll go in. I'd already replaced the gasket and put new screws in, so there was only one thing left and that's the sender. Next thing was I felt it was running a little rich, so I hooked up my sort of homebrew oxygen sensor, and I've got a long piece of copper wire that I can stick into the exhaust here. Problem was, this was reading its max value, which was 22.4. That's nowhere near what I expect to see in an exhaust. So basically that's the little air pump that pumps air through this, that draws the exhaust over the oxygen sensor. Anyhow, I'm not sure what to do there, because I was hoping to get a good reading and be able to adjust the mixture. The other thing is this. I don't have a good return on the throttle. Now when I assembled the carburetors, I think number 3, I think it was a little stiffer than the other ones. I probably should have stopped right there and taken the throttle shaft out and try to see what the problem was. With the whole rack assembled, there is a return. It will return, and when I hooked it up with the cables, there's even more resistance in the cabling. So even if I lubricate the cabling, I'm not happy with that return. I want that to snap shut, because I don't quite feel safe if this thing wants to rev with this much power. So the rack's coming out again, and I'm breaking down the rack, looking at taking out the butterfly for number 3, and I guess I'll probably start more video when I start that process. But for right now, I just wanted to update on where I am with this. Just a couple little problems to sort out, and hopefully get this thing back on the road. Alright, and I'll pick this up again shortly. Alright, so this is interesting. Looking identical in every other way, it seems that the height is different on the original versus the new fuel level sensor. Also, the base is flared a little bit more. Interesting. Anyway, so it looks like the new one is going to trip at a slightly lower level of fuel, and that's fine by me. That's quite a bit of fuel in the bottom of the tank, if you ask me. Yeah. Alright, need to swap over my gasket, which was brand new anyway, and we'll get this back together. Alrighty, so I got the rack out. I'm getting better at this. So yeah, I need to break this apart, separate out carb number 3, and yeah. So this isn't too bad to do. In order to get at the butterfly, I'm going to have to take off the main jet, and I think that's what's, I need to take off the top hat, and yeah, all that stuff. Actually, I think I need that one here. I do have 2 hands. Huh. How about that? I knew I had this thing rigged up on my chest for a reason. So I've drained these two floats or carb bowls. These I've not drained. I kind of ran the engine until it wouldn't run anymore, just to try to clear out the lines, but there was still fuel in the line that connected to the carbs. So yeah, I had to capture that. So alright, here we go. I'll work this thing off. What's holding that still? There's a spring in there. Should that be freeing itself up? It's not the spring. Oh, yes, yes, yes. My bad. And this is probably the reason to drain the float bowls some more, but I'm going to do this without showing you because it's going to be hard to see. Maybe I can do it. Maybe I can flip these around entirely. It's the starter circuits that I need to deal with. And there are two little catches to release. And then I should be able to take that out. There we go. That's what was holding those together. Great. So now that comes off. And here's the spring. It goes in between. And then there's the next one. And what's holding this? That's got it. The idle adjustment. Let's get that screw back in there so it doesn't go anywhere. Alright. Now this one comes off. And there's a little spacer in the middle, which has to go back. So I'll put that over here. This is also something I forgot initially. It's a little screen that goes in here. I believe that goes right. I'm pretty sure that goes in there. It seems like it's meeting some resistance. Oh, there we go. So that, yeah, so that's in there properly. That's something I forgot last time, and I thought I had chucked it out too. So I'm glad I didn't. All right. So first things first. Take off the top hat. I'm probably going to wish I had drained the float bowl as well, so I should do that. I'll crack that open and get that drained out. So now I got to hold this so the spring doesn't go flying. Remove the screws. It's a little easier with the screwdriver. I'm not going to organize this in my my set of bins that are over there under the carb tune. I'm just taking this one apart and make sure we capture that O-ring. Here's the O-ring. Here's the spring. And here's the main jet. Alright, so now we got access in there. I knew I had this little bowl for a reason. And I believe I need my number 5 Allen wrench. Oh no, that's big. It's too big. Must be the number. Yeah, there we go. Alright. So I know fuel is going to come out when I loosen this enough. I replaced the screws that were in here with socket head cap screws because I like they don't strip out nearly so easily. Oop, feeling the fuel already. And here we go. Ooh, that is not much. I did a pretty good job of draining the bowl, I guess. There we go. All right. Yeah, let's take out the floats. I don't want to damage that at all. So wiggle that, take that out. So now I just have all this bottom end here, and we'll set this aside. One thing I'm noticing as I look at this, I'm noticing quite the gap. I don't know if we can capture that on camera. I'm noticing quite the gap on the butterfly, and that's no good. Get a little fuel here dripping out some passages, I think. Alright, so I'd used a Loctite on these screws, so I have a way to deal with this. So I have this piece of wood that I can use to support the back side of the throttle shaft, so that I'm not putting pressure and possibly bending the throttle shaft. So I'll clamp that in my vise. I'll get my screwdriver and I'll put this on top like that. So that broke free pretty nicely, actually. I don't know how the bugs get on my thumb while I'm doing this. Alright, so now that those are loose, I can get this on camera here. So yeah, I'm not happy about I'm going to check this on the rest of them. I'm not happy about the gap that I see around the edge of that. I'm going to take these screws out. Sit down again. Here's one. There's the other one. And now I can wiggle the throttle plate out. These are oblong, so you can't like twist it around completely. You really got to keep it pretty straight in the bore there, because you don't want to mess up the bore. There you go. All right, on throttle plate. Now I just need to loosen up this, which I believe is this one. Oh no. Guess I need a bigger wrench. Need to go find that. Is this a 12? Yeah, my good set's on the boat, the sailboat, so yeah. Alright, so the idea is to loosen this, but not to torque that shaft in the center. So I'm going to try to hold on to, yeah, I'm holding on to this little arrangement on this end of the throttle shaft. There's a nut, a lock nut. There we go. And there's a small washer, and that's used against the throttle shaft seal, which is in there. These are hard to find. I'm actually going to assemble a link to all the places where I got parts to rebuild these carburetors. So you can see, I mean, they move just fine. It actually snaps back nicely. Now, why was it not snapping? Yeah, now that seems like it's a little rough. This I need to sort out. There's the other throttle shaft seal. Why is that rough? I use silicone grease to lubricate this before I put it back together. So that's probably what I'm seeing on this. Clean that off. I might end up using some really fine, really fine, like 1500 grit, maybe higher on this. But I'm feeling for rough spots on here. I'm expecting I'll find something, but I'm not. I mean, this should be really smooth, and it does appear to be really smooth. Let's look at through here. I wonder if I failed to get that stuff really clean. Let's reinsert this. Why is that so rough? See, that moves nicely. And that gets rough on that end. So I think what I'm feeling here is the resistance that I was talking about. Okay, so that's the right position actually, because that's the throttle stop. Full throttle, yep, and idle. Oh, actually, yeah, I should have looked at this before I commented on the gap that I had on my throttle plate. I may have had the throttle stop adjusted. I thought things looked really good when I put things back together. I'm wondering if I had this tightened down too much, and that was causing the resistance. Yeah, so anyway, that's really important to have that snap back. It's really scary to ride the bike and apply some throttle and then release it, and it doesn't go back to idle. That's a scary thing, especially on a 145 horsepower motorcycle. Well, okay, so I guess I've verified. Well, I'm going to check the threads on this. Maybe there's something in the threads as it went through, because it does seem a little rougher. Actually, I mean, that came out pretty nice. And I think it does bind up at the end of the threads, but really that's where it's supposed to bind up, because the threads kind of go away. I mean, the threads can only be cut so far. Alrighty. A little more silicone grease. So, what has to go on here? I have a spring. And this one I wasn't sure about. I think that bent end goes right around that post, and this piece goes against here. So I want to make sure that I get enough I want to make sure I get enough tension on that spring. Alright, so I'm going to get a little bit of grease on here. And not only does this help lubricate it in the bore, the aluminum bore, but it also helps lubricate the throttle shaft seal, because we want that to get a good seal as well. We don't need vacuum links. That's why I replaced the throttle shaft seals. And that's not something that is talked about in the parts diagram. So if you go to look at the parts diagram for carburetors, carburetor, here we go. Yeah, I suppose they don't have the exploded parts diagram in here. Well, this is a lot like it's on the website. And they show the starter circuit there. This part right here is on the end of the carburetor, and they show here on the end of the carburetor with the screws and the springs. What they don't show is the butterfly valve and the shaft. So they don't really illustrate that very well. They just illustrate some of the connecting bits. They don't even show the springs that go between the carburetors. Right, so you can't, that's why you couldn't order those throttle shaft seals. Alright, so let's get this back in here. So now this needs to wind up. So that's got some tension on it. I'm wondering if I should wind it around again. Wow, that's a lot of tension. It doesn't feel right. Anyway, that's nice and snappy. I'm going to go with that. Get the little washer on there. Now get this guy on here. It's kind of keyed to the shaft. That can only go so far, so really I can't over tighten that, right? I think that should be obvious. Nope, that's not the right one. There's this one. Try to tighten this down and make sure that I'm not over tightening it. I'm holding this tightly so that I'm trying to take up the torque so it's not passing through this shaft in the center. Alright. It's pretty nice and snappy. Alright, so nothing there is binding up. Good to know. So I don't know if you can see it, but this is slightly angled. It's not straight, it's angled. Same with this side. That's slightly angled. So what that means is that this, it has to, because of that angle, it has to rotate like this and like this. It never goes perfectly straight. It's always slightly cocked, and that's because it's fitting into the bore like this, and that's stopping the airflow, and then it goes like this to go to full throttle. So that means this needs to go in this way. So very carefully. It needs to be straighter. There you go. So that looks really good. Now I'm going to back off the idle adjustment. Alright, so that's fully backed off. And what we can see is that, it's really hard to see on camera, but there is no light in the top or the bottom there. So the next thing to do is to get these screws reinstalled and get some Loctite on those. Medium strength blue Loctite. I thought I had a number. 24200 is what it says on the tube. Alright, so I'll get these things started. I'm trying to remember how I did this last time. I just want to get those just started so they're in position. And then what I'll do is on the other side, It's kind of a pain. I'll put a little bit. I put a little bit way down in there. This is hard to see. Oop! I just dropped some of it. Dang it. All right. Now I need to get that out of there because I got too much in there. That's a mess. Yeah. All right, so there's a little bit in the threads. So now what I'm going to do is thread it all in completely. Then I'm going to back it out, because what I want to do is make sure that the Loctite is completely in the threads. So I'm just working the screw back and forth to make sure the Loctite is fully in the threads. And here's the other one. Make sure that's nice and tight. All right. Now I'm going to get in there and make sure I've cleaned out all the thread locker that was coating the back of the throttle plate. Alright, so that looks good. And that still moves beautifully. That's exactly what I want. Beautiful. Alright, let's get the Loctite closed up. Next, let's get the bottom end of the carburetor put back together. Alright. So what I want to make sure is that I want to make sure the needle valve is working properly. So I'm going to carefully get that in there. There's an O-ring there and I don't want it to get improperly crushed. Looks like I might need a little lubrication there, so I'll just get a little silicone grease on there. And that should go in much better. There we go. All right, now the float bowl. Just verifying the gasket's all in place. And we'll get that put in. Before I tighten that down, I want to make sure that I don't see any weird places where the gasket might have popped out of position, and I don't. Get those snug down. All right, bottom end put back together. All right, so now figure out how to set that. All right, so we'll get this put back. I want to make sure that the needle jet goes down inside, and it does. One thing about this diaphragm is it wants to it wants to pop up out of the groove. You can see that there's a little ridge there in the bottom of this. There's a lip that goes over that ridge, and if you can make this seat down there, but it doesn't seem to all go down at once. So what I'd like to do is make sure that that is as in place as possible. I put this in place, put the spring in place down on the needle jet. Get that in position. Oh, and then I push as much of this up onto that as possible. Alright, this is not going well. Make sure the diaphragm is right close to where it needs to be. Get this all pushed up onto there. Now that's in position. Now the trick is to make sure that you carefully get this hat pushed down so that the diaphragm is in place to where it should be. What you don't want is to have the diaphragm not in the groove that it needs to be in. So you need to hold the hat down on top and get these screws started. I think that's not lined up. I think that's still not lined up. Yeah, what's up with this? Alright, that's going. Alright, it's all back together. Now, as they say, reassembly is the reverse of disassembly. So yeah, we get this slid back onto here, right there, right there. There's a little bit of a spacer here. It goes right on a little nub down there. Another spacer. Where was that one? Oh, wait a minute. Oh, right up here. Now hopefully those spacers can stay in place, and then I have to get the throttles linked together. The trick here is to get that spring in place. Oh, well, what I can do is take the spring out entirely, huh? And then that just goes right together. And the spacers are where they need to be. Very good. Now I need to get that spring back. It's actually much easier if you can get the spring in position, and then, I mean, if you get it all to fit together nicely. But here, let's try to get this all together. I believe that goes there. This goes on here. Oh, that spring just flew too. Son of a bitch. Alright, so now I've got two springs to put in there. That should be fun. but I'm not taking you along for the ride. I'm going to stop here. Need to get some dinner. I'll save this for, let's say, tomorrow. Oh, there's another spring that was supposed to go in here between those two throttles. Okay. Well, that's another good reason for pulling this apart. That spring needs to go right in there. Oh no, that's not even, there we go. I'm just going to get one of these screws put in here just to hold it up. I'll get the other one loose, put in there loosely as well. Alright, that's it for tonight. Once I get this back together with the springs, I'm going to test the throttle. Make sure it springs back nicely. Alright, there she is. This is a couple days later. And yesterday, I spent some time getting things back together. We've got the new sender unit in the fuel tank. This is actually the wire for that down here. What else? So that fixes the fuel leak. The other thing was the throttle. We noticed the throttle now returns a lot better. It's not perfect. I think there is a bit of resistance in the cables, but it's a heck of a lot better. And when I actuate the throttle on the carburetor rack itself, it snaps right back very quickly. So it's definitely in the cables, and I may end up having to you know, lubricate the cables a little bit. What else? Oh yeah, so somebody had suggested online that 2 turns for the mixture screws on the carburetors was the right default setting for these carburetors, and for my work on older Yamahas, 2.5 turns was the right default, but and that's what I'd used here, but I thought these were running a little rich, and so I had set them to 2.5, and I backed them off to 2, and it seems to run a lot better. So here, let's give it a shot. So yeah, we're in neutral, good. So yeah, it runs a lot better, and I think it's a little cold still, so I might need to give it a little choke. Yeah, it's gonna die out. All right. Yeah, the choke on these things seems a little erratic, but anyhow, I'll just let that warm up. Yeah, yesterday I took this thing for a test drive, and I got around the neighborhood and got back to the house, and it died in the bottom of my driveway. Couldn't get it restarted. It was only later did I realize I'd forgotten to turn on the petcock, and yeah, sure enough, I turned that back on and got everything primed again, and it ran perfectly. So yeah, let me get this restarted again, and we'll take it for a ride. I may have the idle adjusted a little bit low. Wonderful. So easy to go fast. Actually, I'm not sure what happened there. I think maybe the GoPro tilted back a little bit. We'll see how that footage is. Yeah, love the wind in the hair, but yeah, I got to get suited up and take this thing for a proper ride now. So yeah, really enjoying the FZR1000 right now, and can't wait to put some miles on it again. Thanks for watching, and hope you enjoyed my looking after various things on the bike.